Animatables are low-level animation APIs in Jetpack Compose that you can use to have more control over your animation, and you can define your animation to animate to a target value with fine-grained control. They are basically value holders that you can use to animate to different values. And because many of the features of animatables are provided as suspend functions, you often need to call them in an appropriate coroutine scope. So let's create a new application in Jetpack Compose and see how animatables work. I create a new project in Android Studio, a new Jetpack Compose application. I name it Composable Animatables, and I save it in the project directory, and I save it in the source code directory for this course, and I press finish, waiting for the project to be created. Alright, the project is created. What I do now is I remove these composables, the default composables added by Android Studio, and create a new composable to showcase my animatable animation. I name it Animatable Animation Demo, and I also make it a preview so that I can have a preview of it. And before I forget it, I also make a call to this new composable inside the body of my set content, and in turn my application theme, Animatable Animation Demo, so that later I can have a run of my application and see the output on the device from this animation. And to have more space, I minimize the left part, and here I create an animatable animation. Note that animatables are in fact the API backing the animate as state APIs that we have used in some previous videos. So you might see some similarities between them in this video, but they have their differences, and with animatables you have more control and finer control over your animation. So the first thing we need to do for animatables is creating a new animatable variable. I create an animatable to hold the background color of a box. So I name it BG color. This is my new variable, my new state. As always, I use remember, and inside the body of remember I create a new animatable. I import animatable, and for the animatable we need to pass in some initial value. So let's import animatable from appropriate package. We import it from the animation.core package from the Jetpack Compose library. So you can see that it has an initial value and an appropriate type converter. For now, we will only use the first form which has its default type converter, and we will use the color value for that. So animatable we initialize it with color dot red. So our background color will initially be red, and then we will animate it to different colors. We will animate it to some other different colors based on some condition. So color.red, and looks like we imported it from a rank package. I press Ctrl Z and import it again. Let's import it from androidx.compose.ui graphics package. Let's import animatable, Alt Enter. There we go. Next, I'm going to have a checkbox that will determine whether I want to animate this color to a new color or not. So I create a checkbox, val, I create a state for it first, val checked, and unchecked change using the structuring assignment from Kotlin. And remember, mutable state of false. Its value will initially be false. And now let's create our layout. It's a simple box. The box will have a modifier. Import modifier, background. Before background, specify its size. I give it the whole available width, so fill max width, align with some padding. Import padding and background, a padding of 16 dp or dep. And for the background, I pass in bg color. And what about the height? For the height, actually I'm going to use another state that is also specified with animatable. So I create another animatable, val box height, I name it, and I initialize it to an animatable. Let's give it its initial value. I give it an initial value of let's say 200f, because by default animatables support float and color values for animation, and if you are planning to use other data types, you need to provide an appropriate type converter for it. So I pass it float value 200f, and here I say use this animatable as the height of the box. So height will be dp box height. I create a dp from this animatable, in fact from the value stored in this animatable. So let's access its value and pass it to our dp and instantiate a new dp. So the background color also needs to use the value held inside bg color. Alright, now we have specified our animatables to be used for different properties of our box, like height and BG color, but they are not animated because we have not defined the animation behavior yet. So as I said, many of the features and functions for this API animatable is defined as suspend functions, so you need to call them in an appropriate coroutine context. One of the methods to use that and to provide a coroutine context for your composable is calling launched effect with a key. So one of the parameters is key1, which is the list of parameters that you need to pass. In fact, a minimum of one key needs to be provided to launched effect. So here for key1 we pass in checked. The body of launched effect, which is the block parameter, will run in a composable's coroutine context. So each time the value of key changes, then launched effect will run again, and then inside the body of it we can run our animation based on the new value of that state or key. So here I check for the value of checked. If it is true, I decide which value to animate to, and if it is false, then I decide to animate to a different value. So I say BG color, this is coroutine scope, and I say BG color animate to. If the value is true, if checked, then animate red to white. Let's use another color because white is often the background color of the parent surface. Let's use a different color than white because white is often the background color of the parent surface, and for that I use yellow here. If it is checked, then animate to yellow, otherwise animate to color.blue. So this launched box will allow us to do the appropriate animation based on the value of checked on our BG color animatable. So after box, I also actually I put the box inside a column, and after the box I'm gonna have a checkbox. So I wrap this box inside a column, let's give our box a modifier so that we can give it the maximum size, fill max size, like this, and I put the checkbox here after the box, checkbox. For the value of checked, I pass in checked, and for unchecked change I use unchecked change, unchecked change. Alright, I also align in the center these two elements, the children of column. So horizontal alignment, I align them in the center, alignment dot center horizontally. And now we should be able to run it. But before I launch it on the preview in the interactive mode or on the emulator, you need to look at this value and ask yourself why we have an initial value for our animatable. You can see that an animatable has initially a state, a value that can later be changed and animated to another color, to another value. So initially our box will have a background of red, and based on the value of checked, it will animate to a different color. So when we enter the composition, we are initially red, but we will immediately animate to another color based on whether the checked value is false or true. So first it is false, then it will immediately animate to blue, and then if we check it, if we check the checkbox, it will animate to yellow. Alright, we wait for the preview to appear, and then we can run our animation in the interactive mode of the preview pane. Alright, you can see that it is red. It is initially red, the background color of the box, but if I turn on the interactive mode, which means when the user starts interacting and having access to the UI, then it will animate immediately to one of these states, one of these two values, and because it's false, it will animate to blue. So let's turn on the interactive mode. There we go, it's blue. And if I check this checkbox, it animates to yellow. If I uncheck it, it will animate back to blue. You can see that the animation that it uses is very simple. So this is one way of using animatables, using launched effect. But there's another way also to use it, and next I'm gonna talk about it. Because animatables are giving us low-level access to animations and good control of the animation, we can use it with our gestures, with the user's gestures. So one example of it that I'm gonna use on this box is using a pointer input. This will be a simple one, and probably in another next video we will, and probably in another future video we will talk more about gestures and animations. So I import pointer input. After laying out its template, import pointer input, and inside the body of pointer input I use detect tap gestures. Detect tap gestures, import detect tap gestures, you can see that we have on double tap and other parameters for this function, and we have on press that takes a suspend function. So because it takes a suspend function, we can use a coroutine in it. So it's a good place to use animatables and make calls to animatables. I say onPress equals like this, detect tap gestures, onPress. So here I wait for the user to press the box. So I say I make a call to coroutine scope, because I need a coroutine scope to deal with animatables. Let's switch back to code mode so that we don't use too much CPU for now. Coroutine scope, and inside the body of coroutine scope I wait for the user await pointer event scope, and then here I wait for the user await first down. I wait for the user to press the box. So when the user presses the box, I start animating the value of box's height to a new value. So box height animate to we know that first it is 200F, but I'm gonna animate it to 400F. And because it is a suspend function, it needs to be used in launched. So I launch it inside my coroutine scope. It launches a new coroutine. So this is for when the user presses the box, and then I wait for another event to happen, and that is when the user releases the box. Await pointer event, and this time I wait for the user await to release the button. So await, you can see the different methods that are available. Await pointer event, so this time I wait for up or cancellation, and when that happens I tell my animatable to animate to a different color. I tell my animatable to animate to a different value. So box height animate to 300F. So the initial value was 200, and when the pointer event happens, we will have one of these two values as target values of our animation. And note that for animate to, we can also have an animation spec so that we can customize our animation. Here I add an animation spec when we are animating to 400F, when we are increasing the length of our box, the height of our box. So I use a animation spec, a spring animation spec with a damping ratio of damping ratio high bouncy, and a medium stiffness, spring stiffness medium. Alright. In addition to animating our height, we can also animate our color, our background color that we were already animating using our launched effect. So you can animate a value from different points of your composable's coroutine scope. So we were modifying the color both in launched effect, and we can also modify it in the pointer event, in the pointer input modifier for the box. So I can launch another coroutine here, or I can in fact continue my code inside the body of this launch and say bg color dot animate to a different color, a different value, color dot cyan. For example, when the user presses the box, I'm going to animate to color dot cyan. Alright, now let's see the effect in our preview. Let's refresh our preview. Alright, I'm turning on the interactive mode. And now let's check the checkbox. You can see that it behaves just like before, but we have also added the gesture detection pointer input to our box. So if I press it, I will have an animation. I expect to have, yes, I do. You can see, and when I release it, I have another animation. There we go. Yes, you can see we have two animations when I press it. Both the height of the box and the color of the background animate to new values. And in order to animate the background to a different color, when I release the box, I also add a simple code here inside this launch body, box height animate to 300f. After this, I add bg color dot animate to color dot brown. For example, I don't have brown. I can animate to light gray, like this. And I'm also going to add a border to my box. Yes, border to dp for the width of the border, and color dot black for the color of it. There we go. Let's build and refresh the preview. Alright, our interactive mode is ready. I press the box. There we go. You can see we have two animations running, and when I release it, it animates to the gray color, and animates back to gray when I release it. And what happens if in this situation we check the checkbox? You can see that it works as expected. The checkbox animation modifies the checkbox. When it changes the value of checked, which in turn changes the value of BG color and animates it to yellow. And if I uncheck it, it will animate back to blue. But the value of background is also modifiable and is modified using our press gestures. Like this. The only issue that we see is that the animation of the height and the animation to the cyan color are not happening at the same time. Let's find the reason for it. So first we can see that first the animation of the box height happens, and when it finishes then BG color animates to cyan. In order to make them happen at the same time, I'm gonna launch another coroutine for the color, like this, and now they will happen at the same time. Now I expect them to happen at the same time because each of them will launch a separate coroutine that will not block the main thread of execution. The current thread is not blocked. So let's press it again. There we go. You can see that the increase in the length and animation to cyan happen at the same time. And you are also seeing the effect of spring animation that we used on the box height animatable when we press the box, and when we release it we are using the default animation to decrease the height. So that's it basically for how to use animatables. You can modify animatables and animate to different values inside the body of a launched effect with a key, or you can use your composables coroutine scope by calling coroutine scope in an appropriate context, in an appropriate scope, like on press, that will allow us to use coroutine scope to call coroutine scope, and inside coroutine scope we can detect users press and release, and then we can launch a coroutine to run an appropriate animation and animate to a suitable target value. So this was an introduction to animatables and how you can use it in your Compose applications. And with that, I wrap up this video.